Hello and welcome to the Bellingham Real Estate Podcast. I'm Paul Balzotti. I'm here with Justin Nelson. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and today we are talking about buying a new home or building and all things new construction. I think most people love new, and there's a lot of people that have a dream of either building or buying a new home. And so we're going to deep dive into that today. Justin, I know you've been in the business for 10 years now?
Yep, been in the business 10 years now.
And so you've helped many buyers with this process. And so we're gonna cover everything from buying land and a complete custom build to doing a pre-sale to if you're just buying a new construction home, just some tips and things to think about. Yeah. So let's kind of start with let's say the most difficult one. The buying land and then building a custom home, because I think that's kind of where a lot of people start, because that's really the dream. That's when you can then get the land you want, customize it, get everything you want potentially. And I think, I don't know about you, I'd say that at least a third of the buyers that I've worked with over the years at least kind of started with that idea that they'd like to do that. And some execute, many others are not able to pull it off or decide against it as they've kind of get further into it. But what's been your experience as far as just talking on buying land and then going custom from there?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good thing to point out, because so many people we talk to, and you touch on a third, it might even be more than that, that say hey, I'd really like to build, but I mean, so many people get into that, the idea of, buying the land and building the custom. But I think it's a dream for a lot of people, but a lot of people don't actually execute just because of the steps involved. You've got to buy the land first and then find the builder or the general contractor to work with. And unfortunately, buying the land is kind of the most difficult part of it. And sometimes people come to us, they already have a piece of land that they own, or maybe it's been in the family, or they were able to buy it from a family member, or they already have the land and they're looking for us to kind of point them in the direction of a builder or a general contractor. But most time it's the contractor, the builder getting in touch with us saying, hey, I've got this person wanting to build. Can you help them find land? And so that generally gets the ball rolling there. That's how we get involved with it.
Yeah. And so when you are looking at land for a buyer, or somebody's listening or watching, they're thinking, what are the tips for what I should be considering when looking for a lot? What are you generally looking at, or what calls are you making to the listing broker to figure out if the lot is a good lot for building on?
It's so each one of them varies so much, because it can depend on the type of home they're building, the size of home. For instance, some people want, that net zero home. So, okay, if you want a net zero home that's going to be built green, it's got to have good southern exposure for solar panels. There's a lot that goes into it. That's one thing. But also, too, do they want the city? Do they want county? What part of the county they want? So really, you start getting into the nuances of the land. And then once you find something, reaching out to the listing broker, it's getting as much information as you can from them. But a lot of it, too, comes back on to the buyer, them doing their due diligence, their homework. Can they do what they want to do on the land? 'Cause the listing agents have information, but they don't have all the information. And the person selling the land might know a lot of stuff about it, but not enough to maybe build a home on it or something that this person wants to do. So that's when you start getting into the feasibility aspects of it and walking buyers through that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so you brought up feasibility. So that's definitely a topic we should touch on. So feasibility meaning, you write the offer on the land, and then you almost always have a feasibility period where you could back out and get your earnest money back. Mm-hmm. Because even if the listing broker and the seller say, we have a septic design in place, we have a well permitted, you go to the county, sometimes the information is not up to date. Sometimes what they said you can do, you can't necessarily do, or sometimes what they say you can do, you can do, but it's a lot more expensive than what you initially think. So I think probably the most common thing, and correct me or add on if you feel differently, that comes up is you You find a lot for like $100,000, and so they have a builder who says, I'll build you a house for $600,000. So they're going, okay, I can do that, $700,000. And then of course, but the lot that's $100,000, to get it from where it is to where the builder can start building the home, sometimes once you get into all that with the well, the septic, the utilities, the impact fees, the wetland delineations, all of these different factors, all of a sudden the $100,000 lot is a $300,000 lot. Maybe bringing in the driveway, there's all sorts of complications. And I think that developing the lots is probably where the most difficulty comes in. Like if there was a lot more just developers that were developing lots, just getting them totally serviced ready, we'd see a lot more new construction. I think that's the most difficult part.
I think you hit the nail right on the head there. And this is what is so tough with that custom home build and working with the buyer is, like you said, that lot, oh man, I found this lot. It's in a great location. It's $100,000. And then our budget, like you said, let's just throw a number out there, $600,000, because we're staying in that $700,000 bubble. Like this is our budget. But they don't realize, like, just because the listing broker said it's this or the owner says it's that, it is on the buyer to find out if they can do what they want. And that feasibility study is so important. And you're exactly right. That $100,000 lot all of a sudden becomes $150,000, $175,000, $200,000, $300,000 because you had to do wetland delineation. You had to get, they did a septic test at one point, the percolation test. Well, that's expired now. You have to bring them back out there. And then all this stuff adds up. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of the buyers' dreams die right there.
Yeah.
And I think that's why developers are in the position they're in and good builders are good at it, because that's the step they understand.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the buyers don't realize that. And I know I do when I'm talking to buyers about this and all the steps, it's trying to educate them, inform them, bring them up to speed while not scaring them away.
Yeah.
Because there's so much involved and there's so much they don't know. And trying to okay, I'm going to hold your hand through this. There's going to be a lot here. You might even have to bring in, land use consultant.
That's a good point. A land use consultant can be
because they think,
valuable.
Unfortunately, we have a lot of information and we can walk them through, but we're not everything to it. So you do have to bring in someone else sometimes, and it can just add on and become so expensive, and that's really tough.
Well, the land use consultant, that is, if you're really determined to do this, that is a great thing to bring up that buyers should think about, because I think what also happens is you start looking at land, we get all the information we can, then we go to let's say it's in the county, you go to the county planning department, and basically the planning department, when you go to them and you're like, how do I build a house here? Generally speaking, no, nothing personal against anybody there. They're all great. But they're not sitting there saying, okay, here's the ways you could build. They're kind of more or less kind of showing you all of the hoops you have to jump through. And like, oh, you're going to have to do this. You have this setback, you have this. And navigating that. And then, and then sometimes they'll even say, well, this may be really difficult to do. Having a land use consultant who kind of not only, knows, all of the same things, but knows all the workarounds.
Yes.
But oftentimes they can sit there and say to you, look, they said you'd have to apply for that, but I know we're going to be able to get that, or I know we're not going to be able to get that. And so, because a lot of times there's multiple things you have to go through to just figure out if you can do what you want to do. Like, are you going to get the setback that you want? Are you going to get this that you want? There's might be an easement. There's just so many variables.
Yes.
And so a land use consultant, man, that is probably the ticket. And then the other thing I think that is so important if you wanted to go that route is, you brought up all of these things, just the time, I know a broker who is building himself right now for himself. They picked up the lot 2 years ago. And then maybe longer. And then they started doing all the work, over the last year to get the lot developed and prepared. And then they started building about 7-8 months ago. But from the time they bought the lot to the time the home's going to be finished, it's 2.5, 3 years. So I think the other thing that, when we're in, I think that's why we want to start with the most difficult, and then move in from there in this conversation, is it's not just, the most difficult, but it's also, I think what also stops a lot of people is, do they have the time? Do they, and maybe they do. And if you do have 3 years to plan this out, maybe you can make it work, but if a lot of times, I feel like by the time the buyer comes to us, they were really hoping to do something within a year or two.
Yes.
And the patience involved in the process.
Well, the patience and the energy, like, they've got this idea and it's going to be great. And they do have great ideas. They do they know what they want and they know how they want the house to look, or they found this, this builder that's going to build this home, and that's the dream. And we want to help them with that. But all the items that we have to check to get them there. And I think that's where we really can come in and help the process with these builders, is trying to educate the buyers and not scare them away, because there is so much to go through. Like you said, like in their head, they might think, oh, well, if I'm going to buy a house, that'll take me 30 days. I can close on a new home in 30 days, but like build a home, well, that's about 6 months, right? But then like actually educate them, like, hey, if you don't have the lot, it's going to take a while just to figure out if you can do what you want to do on this lot. Yeah. And then that's just the beginning, and the onus is on the buyer, do their homework, and it is a lot. And I think it becomes overwhelming for a lot of people. They get this idea in their head, and sometimes it is unrealistic. And so we try to soften it as much as we can to kind of educate them and tell them, like, hey, this is how the process is really going to go. But you're right. It's the much more difficult route. It's not easy. If it was really easy, everyone would do it. Yeah.
And so, we're kind of saying in so many words that it's really difficult. Most of the time it doesn't work out. Unfortunately, but we still try to help a lot of people with it. And we still, we want to, help people figure out if it's going to work. Yeah. And sometimes it does.
Yeah. And when it does, it's so great.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting them through all those processes. Yeah. We got the land. It's going to work how they want. We got them through the feasibility, the ground perked. If it needs a septic there, there's not a whole bunch of wetlands, like, all those boxes we were able to help them out with. Yeah.
It's like with the fully custom, having the land consultant and the realtor and the builder, or maybe if they don't have the builder, we can recommend different builders that they can interview. So they need us, but it's a lot to unpack there. So let's say we bring it forward to the next level of kind of probably way more common way that people would build, which is a pre-sale. Yep. So now we're talking about either a builder who has bought 1 lot, 2 lots, and already developed them. They've already got plans permitted, and then they're basically pre-selling it and saying, hey, you can pick out some of the finishes. I'm going to build this house. They've already figured out their margin of what they're expecting from it. They're kind of buying themselves a job essentially, to build you a home, or of course, just a development where you have a lot of homes going in. And then, you're picking out, in some cases, the floor plan, but generally just the floor plan's already pre-picked. And then you're picking out things as you go. Talk about that process a little bit.
Okay, yeah. Because with that one, I think it's great transition-wise for this conversation, because many people that start off wanting a custom home build end up in this route, because the builder's already done all the work. They've developed the land, all the utilities are in, everything's set. So they come in and say, hey, we like this house. And a lot of times the builder or developer would be like, okay, you have option A, which will add on, $15,000. You got option B, which might add on 40, option C add on 50, and there's ways they can tweak it, the colors, the finishes, the customization. And so we can get involved with that really easily, because what it allows us to do, it's like, okay, we're just throwing numbers out here. Let's say the home's $500,000, and then, but that's the starting package, but they want package B, and package B is an additional, let's say $40,000. Like, okay, well, hey, here's an option. We can come in, try to negotiate the price a little bit, kind of get things for the homeowner or the buyer that they wouldn't get on their own, to see if we can I don't know, negotiate on their behalf a lot better. And I think that's one route we ended up going a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of buyers.
Yeah. And that's a good point that, a lot of times when a buyer will go to a pre-sale, the builder kind of tries to frame it. If they go directly to the builder kind of tries to frame it like, look, everything's just kind of prepackaged here. You don't really need a buyer representation. Mm-hmm. And of course, buyer representation is all over the news right now. Like, do you need a buyer representing you in every situation? And as you mentioned, builders say one thing like, oh, this is what I charge. But ultimately, when they have somebody by their side representing them, oftentimes we can upfront negotiate on their behalf, mm-hmm. especially for those upgrades, because the builder wants to, everything costs more, but essentially the builders have built-in profit on pretty much every upgrade that they charge. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, a lot of times we can negotiate on their behalf to, get some of those upgrades done for less money. And then, I've seen buyers also where they'll hire us to like write the offer, and then they're communicating with the builder all the way through. And then, you start to become, all of a sudden, if there's delays or the builder says this or the builder says that, if you don't have that realtor by your side, kind of like helping you along the way, the builders can sometimes take advantage of the situation, whether it be, again, profiting on the upgrades, with delays, with issues. If you don't have like that second set of eyes, that second person talking to the builder or the listing broker directly, there's a lot of things that can come up.
Yeah. No, there's a lot. I always tell people we're counselors and consultants, but that, like in those instances, not only are we the consultant representing the buyer, we're the liaison. We're going, to, and most builders don't realize, like, this is why the builder has a listing broker, mm-hmm. to discuss and negotiating on their behalf. So we're that go-between between the two of them. And, for instance, I think one of the last ones I did, something like this, things are coming up and I'm going, instead of to the builder, I'm going to the listing agent, asking them questions. They're going to their client, coming back to me. So we're able to work things out between the two of us and get things resolved, where I feel like had my client just been getting the information directly from the builder, I don't know it would have gone as well.
Yeah.
And I just kind of think that's what we add to it. I mean, it's the same reason they have the listing broker too. Like, the listing broker is there to represent the builder, and the buyer needs to be represented in this scenario, so someone's looking out for their best interest.
Absolutely. And when you have a new construction development, you can have the ones where they are all listed on the MLS, but most of them, even just to find what's available, there is, if you're looking right now, or if you're thinking, man, it'd be nice to be able to look for pre-sales, but I don't see anything, we also can go to the builder direct in a lot of these cases and say, hey, what do you have upcoming? Yeah. And a buyer can do that direct, but a lot of buyers don't even know where all the new construction is. So another aspect of this is just even finding these opportunities. Almost every development has some upcoming, if it's not just a one-off, if it's a developer who's got a development, they might have a couple more lots available that they're going to be getting permits on, or they're already building that they've been just kind of waiting to list. Mm-hmm. They might have another development down around the corner that they're starting, but they haven't marketed it yet. Yeah. And so we can also just essentially help people find those opportunities too.
No, and I think you touched on something very important right there. It's, okay, the builders got their development going. And unfortunately, let's say the current phase they're in, phase 2 or phase 3, there's 10 homes, they pre-sold them and they're all taking up, but oh shoot, my buyer really wanted to be in there. Having those relationships within the industry to be able to reach out to them, say, hey, I know you just finished this phase. Do you have another phase coming up? Can you give me more information on that? And usually they'll get that to us, and then we can provide that to our buyers. And I think that's really beneficial. I mean, it really allows them to not be discouraged, like, oh, I can't get into that neighborhood. It's like, well, hey, made the phone calls, found out they're actually doing a couple more phases after this. Are you guys interested in getting in on that? But that's because of the relationships we have and develop within the industry.
Totally. And what also can happen is that a lot of times the builder, they will be like kind of on the fence on whether they even want to sell it yet, because in an appreciating market like we have right now, it's been, of course the market's been relatively flat the last couple of years, but generally new construction's still been generally appreciating. So a lot of times they're holding off, because they may not want to have you represented. They may want to get those internal sales that saves them a little bit on fees. But also they may just be kind of waiting on the price. And so sometimes even if they say, we have these 2 lots coming up, we haven't really decided on a price, we can then push and say, okay, well, the last one you sold for this, what if we just bring you an offer? You already have permits on that floor plan. They might say, sure. So sometimes we can also push and just kind of get a contract going with the builder on a lot that they weren't otherwise maybe even ready to move forward with.
Well, because they might not have thought like, okay, are we going to be able to continue to be profitable here? But if we can show them, hey, I've got this buyer who wants his house, and this, like you said, you touched on, sold for this much, and, we could be willing to, come to the table with this. Being able to negotiate and finding a deal, just finding the availability of that property, but then working with the builder and putting it together, I think helps the builder, because they now know, hey, I've got one more sale I can do. I can sell this, but also taking care of that buyer that also was looking for that new build.
Yeah. Yeah. And then lastly, I want to touch on, let's say the home was already finished. What are a couple of the things that come up with buyers that they don't necessarily think about if the home's already brand new, already complete?
So this happens a lot. Essentially we're talking about spec homes. We're talking about the builder built the homes. They're sitting there ready to go. These are one of the ones I really enjoy, because not only are you dealing with someone that's getting into or wants to get into a brand new home, no one's lived in it before, you're also dealing directly with the builder who has the opportunity to kind of work with you a little bit. So I find you can kind of really represent the buyers the best possible. Is there a fence on the yard? Can we get it fenced? Can we get, them to warranty the work for a year? Can we get them to come back? But one thing a lot of them don't realize is you still need to get the new home inspected. And a lot of people are like, why would we inspect it? It's brand new. Well, jobs are busy. Job sites are busy places. You got people coming, you got people going. You have so many subcontractors. You got the general trying to juggle everything. And, unfortunately, crawl spaces don't get insulated. Unfortunately, some outlets don't get, wired up. Unfortunately, some attics get, insulation put in backwards. So, we can come in and say, hey, this is why you have to inspect it, have it looked after. And then generally the builder, they're all for coming back and getting it taken care of, where if it was a resale home, the homeowner doesn't always want to do this stuff. But generally with a new sale, the builder says, yep, no problem. We'll have our guys out there. We'll get it taken care of, because it's their reputation on the line too. And they want that good word of mouth. So, I think that's one thing that really comes up a lot is, why do I need this inspected? But absolutely.
Yeah. And with the home inspection, you basically, you're right. It's the one time where whatever comes up in the home inspection, pretty much almost all of it, or all of it in most cases, the builder, you can almost just hand the inspection report to the builder.
9 times out of 10, that's what I'm doing. Just like, hey, this is what we found.
And then we get to go around and put the tape on the wall for all the little smudges. Like, you got to touch up this, you got to touch up that.
And then we come back through in the walkthrough and it's all been done.
Yeah.
And even if it hasn't been done and they're still finishing up, the builder's generally still in the neighborhood, or you've got their contact information, and they're coming back and taking care of it. They are. And it's one of the ways I really love working with builders, especially with homeowners buying them. It's just like, the builder's taking care of the buyer, and we get to represent them, and then just hand over those keys to a brand new home. And that's awesome.
I've had twice, not once, but twice, where the tub was when I bought not my current home, but I bought my prior home, new construction. It was completed. And there's been happened another, but where the tub has been not connected.
No.
So in the home that I bought like 15 years ago, this is the second floor primary bath, and it had the like, what is it called? The jets.
Yeah.
They were super popular 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the tub was fine if you just ran the tub.
Yeah.
But if you ran the jets, when the inspector ran the jets, all of a sudden there was like a leak or something that they could notice. And basically the little tubes that you hooked up to the jets, the guy who had installed it just had, basically been a little sloppy with connecting those. And one of them just popped right off right away. Oh, no. And that would have eventually flooded everything underneath.
Yes. Oh, my God.
If we wouldn't have had that inspected. Yeah. And then another buyer I had who purchased a brand new construction home, kind of similar, where it wasn't the jets, but basically underneath the like the drain hadn't got completely connected really well from the tub to underneath, and they had to pull everything out and redo it just because it was a little bit sloppy the way they had done it. And so it's like these subs could make a really basic mistake that you don't catch. And then it could be a really big, by the time you catch it 5 years later.
Well, because no one's lived in the home yet, so you don't know these things. And unfortunately, subcontractors get busy just like we all do. And unfortunately, we all make mistakes. But with bringing the home inspector, they find this. It's like worth every penny.
Yeah.
Thank you for finding this.
And the subs are busy, or they're just not very good. Like there's definitely, there's generals that, that'll have a team of some great subs, but then they might have bring in a new plumbing group for the first time.
Yeah, or your regular guy, he's sick, but I got to hit this deadline, so I
bring in some random
his
guy,
cousin or someone else. Yeah,
and then no one really checked that work.
Yeah, no.
And especially let's say it's under a tub, it's like, hey, I hooked that up. Okay, you said you hooked it up.
Well, and unfortunately, the person to test the work, or I guess fortunately for us, especially for the buyers, the person that tested the work is the home inspector that the buyer hired to come in and do this job.
Right.
And it saved them, like you said, with the example of the tub not being connected up properly, you're not going to know that for like a year and a half, 2 years, and suddenly it's, hey, this is why this spot is here. Oh no, the tub has been leaking ever since we moved in. So, so many people question it, but it's like, no, you absolutely get it inspected.
And you brought up a year and a half, 2 years with a new home. If you put this in place, there's usually a policy where at the 1 year point, you could do a walkthrough with the builder if you put that in place right off the bat.
Yeah, a lot of builders will do it, and I think it's actually a misconception within the state of Washington that there is a law that the builders have to warranty for a year. And I can say this with absolute certainty. I know this because I just had a conversation with a general contractor last Thursday because this topic came up recently, and I was trying to consult or with someone else, a colleague. So in the state of Washington, there is no law that warranties a brand new home for a year. It doesn't exist. What happens is the builder builds the home, wants the good word of mouth, and is going to do that. So like you just touched on, whether it's 1 year or 2 year, they're going to come back through and they're going to, depending on what you've talked about or what they've offered or what we've negotiated on their behalf, like they're going to come back through and help fix anything. I shouldn't say anything, probably not anything, but they're going to come back and touch up some stuff that needs to be taken care of. But that's one thing you don't get with a resale, but with a new construction home, you generally will get that with a builder because builders want that good word of mouth.
I like the idea of when we do this where we have the builder do the 1 year home warranty, because then you get them warrantying their work and then backing their work and then that 1 year walkthrough. But then additionally, when you buy home warranties, they have normally a home warranty for $700 is 1 year. Like on a resale home, you can get these 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 year extended warranties for new construction that are relatively affordable. And so that's kind of a good double whammy there. If you have the builder warranty for a year and then you get the extended warranty, and this isn't like buying a extended warranty on like a TV or something. This could be something that comes up like that wasn't hooked up properly, and then there's a leak and there's a problem 3-4 years later, and it's a really good bang for the buck.
Yeah. No, they're not that. They're not that much more expensive to add on, and on top of what the builders already do. And I just think it's really beneficial for the buyer and the homeowner. It just really is.
Well, thank you for joining today, Justin.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was great having the conversation. If you're looking to build or buy new construction, reach out to this guy. 10 years in the business, knows what he's doing.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Justin.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, guys.